All right, today we're continuing what we were doing yesterday and the day before, but now with the translations, the shifting right and left and up and down. Have you guys done that before? Yes? Okay. Part one, vertical shift. Part one, vertical shift. Typically the easier of the shifting is the vertical shift, just up or down. Where kids tend to struggle with this section is the amplitude, so I'm going to make sure I go over that with you. All right, we are going to graph number one, y equals sine x plus 3. You guys have spent a lot of time with this in Math 2 and Math 3, that the plus number at the end is your vertical shift, yes? Yes? And if it's positive, it shifts upward, and if it's negative, it shifts downward. Do you guys remember that from last year? Okay, so it's same concept, but now we're extending it to the sine graph. All right, and cosine. What is the amplitude? 1. Period, 2 pi over 1 from that 1, 2 pi over 1 from the 1 in front of the x, or 2 pi over 3. What is it? 2 pi over 1, and the 1 coming from the coefficient of x, right? So the period is 2 pi. All right, now we have our vertical shift. And the vertical shift is what? 3. In what direction? Up. Up 3. Okay. Questions? Yes.
How did you get the 2 pi?
That was from yesterday's lesson. Yesterday's lesson, a lot of you were not here for because of the testing. We learned yesterday, so I do want to go over that really quick. Your period length is always 2 pi divided by the coefficient of b. 2 pi divided by the coefficient of b. Right now?
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Are you, Savannah? All right. So if you take a look here at the ones that we did yesterday. B is pi over 2, and we did the work here. 2 pi divided by pi over 2, flipped it, reduced it, 4. We did it here. The coefficient here, the b is 4, so it's 2 pi over 4 reduced to pi over 2. What the period does is determine where you end. Without a horizontal shift, we will always start at 0 and end at our period. Start at 0, end at 4. Start at 0, end at pi over 2. Okay, so this one here, because the period is 2 pi and there's no horizontal shift, there's no right and left shift, we're going to start at 0 and end where? 2 pi? All right, so when you make your graph, make it so you have a big enough x-axis because we're shifting upward. So let me show you how I'm going to make mine. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. X-axis, y-axis. Now, if you can remember to do the vertical shift first and the amplitude second. First, second, because that's where kids mess up. They, I don't know, they flip-flop things and they get the amplitude and then they're not sure and where's my shift, and a lot of funky things happen. So what do we do first? Vertical shift. And what do we do second? Amplitude. Okay, now, all right, let's just do it. Okay, so here's what I suggest. You go up 1, 2, 3, and I put what's called a fake axis. I'm going to do it really light. This is not part of the graph. I just put it there as a guide. Okay, so is this dotted line an asymptote? No. Is it part of the graph? No, it's just there as a guide to help us. So think of this as being your x-axis. So I call it my fake axis. Okay? So this is my guide. When I'm talking about zeros and stuff, I'm talking about this one here. They're not real zeros. They're fake zeros, again, because it's a fake axis. Okay, so what is the amplitude? 1. That means from here, I'm going to go up 1 and down 1, because that's what the amplitude does. Does that make sense? All right, so sine graph, is it the one that snakes around like a snake, or that starts high and makes a cup shape? Snake. So it starts at 0. And what did I forget to do? Got to label down here. What's my endpoint? 2 pi. And 2 pi cut in half. Pi and pi cut in half. Pi over 2, 1 over 2, 2 over 2, and this is 3 pi over 2. Yes or no? All right, so 0. Okay, so my next key point is pi over 2, and that's the maximum. And for us, where's the maximum going to be? 4, because I had a shift of up 3. Back to my 0, again, fake 0, because it's a fake axis. Minimum, where's the minimum going to be? 2. Back to my 0. So I have my hill and then my valley. Make sense? So it's the exact same thing. Okay, now remember amplitude is half the length from your max to your min. My max is 4, my min is 2. What's the distance between 4 and 2? 2, and what's 2 cut in half? 1. So is the amp still 1 like we said? Yes? Okay, so if you can remember, shift first, draw your fake axis in, and then make your graph. Now here's the kind of questions where kids get confused on. What is the maximum? That one's pretty easy. What's the maximum? Where does it occur? What's the minimum? 2. Where does it occur? 3 pi over 2. What are the zeros? That's the tricky part. Where are the zeros? Remember, what did I call these earlier? I called them... there are no zeros. I called them fake zeros earlier. Remember I said they're zeros, but really they're fake zeros because this is a fake axis. Your real zeros are always on your x-axis. Now, why did he say there aren't any? It doesn't go below 2. It's never going to touch the x-axis. So that's where you have to be careful on the test. When you graph this and it asks you, where are the zeros? What's the most common wrong answer I get? 0 pi and 2 pi. Those are fake zeros. Be careful. This is your real x-axis. That's where the only place your zeros occur, and there aren't any on this one. Make sense? Yeah? Yeah. All right. Number 2. Y equals 1 minus cosine of x. All right, this is my thinking bubble. If it confuses you this way, then rewrite it. This is the same thing as saying what? Negative cosine x plus 1. All right, so rewrite it. Think of it that way. I would just rewrite it, but if you can just do it in your head, negative cosine x plus 1. Do you see that? Yes? Okay, amplitude is 1, and you do have, this is showing your work, this piece right here. Amplitude is 1. Does that negative change the amplitude? No, but it does change the graph. Okay, amplitude, period, is still 2 pi over the coefficient of x, so 2 pi over 1. So it's 2 pi. And my vertical shift is up 1 in the upward direction. Okay, so I don't need as much space as I did on this one, but still a little more than usual. Can anybody tell before we graph, if it shifts up 1 and the amp is 1, what's going to be the max and the min? Can you guys do that in your head? the question I asked is if it's a vertical shift upward 1 and the amp is 1, what's going to be your max? 2. And what's going to be your min? 0. Can you guys see that? Okay, let's get it. If you can't, we're gonna graph. Ow. Okay, 2 pi, because that is the period length. Half of 2 pi is pi. Half of pi is pi over 2, 1 over 2, 2 over 2, and 3 pi over 2. Here's 1, 2, 3. And which part do we do first? The amp or the vertical shift? The vertical shift. And how far do we shift? Upward 1. Now this dotted line is my fake axis, not the real axis. And then the max or the amplitude is 1, so I'm going to oscillate between 2 and 0. Do you guys see that? Up 1, down 1. Okay, this is cosine. Is cosine the one that snakes around the axis or that cups? Cup. And so it starts at a max or a min. In this case it's negative, so it starts at a min. So when I'm here at my 0 key point, will I go up 1 or down 1? Down 1. When I come to my next key point, it's my fake 0. My next key point is another 0 or the maximum? Maximum. My next key point is a fake 0. And my last key point, a max or a min? A min. Does that make sense? Is that a yes?
What's that? Oh yeah, here. For volleyball. Oh, sorry, I've been jogging. Yeah, we write like nice things to like after your teacher. I picked you because like you're like super sweet and like you make math easy for me.
Can I get a hug?
Yeah.
Thank you. You are very sweet.
Alright, I gotta head out. Everyone's gotta get out their notes.
Okay.
I'll see you next period.
All right. See ya. You have the assignment sheet. It has the book page. Okay. All right. They're sweet. Okay. So like this. Got it? Okay. What is the maximum? 2. What's the minimum? 0. Do you see that? And does this graph have any real zeros? How many? 2. Where do they happen? 2 pi. This one does have real zeros because it does touch the x-axis. Do you see that? Okay. Are we good? Next part. Part 2. Horizontal shifts. And you guys you said you did do horizontal shifts with these last year? Okay. Maybe?
Yeah.
Alright. Now I'm writing sine, but this works for cosine as well. So would it matter if it's sine or cosine? Or cosecant, or secant. Yeah, we'll graph those as well. It can't be tangent or cotangent. That's the one thing it doesn't work for. All right, that one's a little different. What does the A tell us? And it's A or the absolute value of A? Can't forget the absolute value. What does the B tell us? The coefficient of x tells us helps us find the what? Period. So the period is 2 pi over b. And I'm going to ignore the c for now. What does the d tell us? Shifts up or down, and how far, right? So that's the vertical shift. Okay, so this is all the stuff we've done so far. Vertical shift. The inside here, all of this, not just the c, but the bx plus c plus u is what tells us the horizontal shift. Does anybody remember from last year? Not just from this unit, but from your shifting, how to find your horizontal shift, what you do with this parentheses? Set it equal to bx plus c equals 0. Do you guys remember if it was x plus 5, it didn't mean that it moved right 5. Do you guys remember that? It moved, the x-axis was always the opposite direction, and this is why. I don't know if you guys learned it that way, but it's because you said it equal to 0 and solve. Got it? Okay. Now, I didn't think to ask your Math 3 teachers from last year which way they taught it. So I'm going to take information from you guys. I'll explain it my way. We'll talk about which way works, cosine of x plus pi. All right, let's find our bits and pieces first, because I'm sure we all do that the same way. Amplitude is what? 1. Your period is 2 pi over the coefficient of x, which is, what is it? 1. Just really quick side note, sometimes, don't write this down, sometimes there's a coefficient out here. That is still your coefficient of x, because if you were to distribute, it would be 3x plus 3 pi. Do you see that? So if there was a 3 out here, what would you put? Not 2 pi over 1, but 2 pi over 3. So be careful if that coefficient has been pulled out. Okay. Vertical shift. Vertical shift happens on the outside. Is there an outside vertical shift? None. Is there an inside horizontal shift? If there is, things do change a little. Okay, will change a little. So you take your x plus pi and you set it equal to 0. You subtract, that gives you x equals negative pi, yes or no? Okay. Horizontal shift is negative pi. What does that mean? We're going to move left pi, so I'll put a little note there. Left pi. Got it? Okay. Anyone want to share or thoughts? Do you guys remember how you did the shift? Yes.
In the dollars, I think it was like, if it's x plus pi, it's the opposite, so it'd be x minus pi. And when it's subtraction, you go to your left, it's your x value.
Yes. So that's what I was asking earlier. Do you guys remember that? When she's saying when it was plus, it was left, and when it was minus, it was right? Yeah. Yes. So do you have to show this work here? No. The reason I do is because it's not always like this one right here. You can't just say right pi because of the 3. So you'd have to set it equal to 0 and get pi over 3. Do you see that? So that's the only reason why I don't just say opposite, because if there's coefficients, that does take part in your solving. Did you guys do any with the coefficients like that? Okay, so that's the only reason I don't say, but it does work. Same concept. X is always opposite direction, but I do take the time to set it equal to 0. Same thing with this one. Set it equal to 0. Kids will say, oh, it moves right pi. No, it moves right how far? Pi over 2. Got it? Okay. All right. So I'm going to explain how I do it, and you guys can see if it was similar to how you did it last year, and we will go from there. And darn it, I closed my notes. All right. So when we have this, there's a start and an end is the way I teach it. There's a start and an end, because typically when we have this without any shifting, where do we always start? And we always end, not just always at 2 pi, but depending on what the period is. So this one here, we started at 0 and we ended at pi because the period is pi, right? Start at 0, end at 4 because the period is 4. Start at 0 and end at pi over 2, again because the period is pi over 2. So the length here is always the period length. The period length is pi over 2. The period length is 4. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, with that in mind, we are going to start and end at different places because of this shift. Okay, so let's write it down. Your start will always be the HS. What does HS stand for? Horizontal shift. Your start will always be whatever your horizontal shift is. Okay? Another start, your end will always be whatever your horizontal shift is plus the period. Okay, why, think about it, why is it horizontal shift plus the period? Your horizontal shift is where you're starting, correct? So let's say the period length is 4, and I move left 2. If I move left 2, where will I end? I'm going to repeat that. If the period length was 4 and we moved to left 2, can you guys do that in your head? If I start at -2, where would I end? 2. And why is that? Because -2 plus the period length puts me at 2. Do you guys see that? Okay. -2 is where I would start, and if my period length is 4, -2 plus 4 is 2. You guys probably did that without doing the math. You could just see in your head, oh, the distance here has to be 4, so it's right 2. Does that make sense? Okay, so again, where you start plus your period length will tell you where you're going to end, because this has to be the length of your period. All right, so let's try it. What is my, I'm going to bubble this in really quick because this is really big key information. Where do we start on this one? What is my start? -pi. And my end is I take my starting point, which is -pi, and what do I add to it? 2 pi. That's my period length. And what do I get as my answer? What? Pi. Think about it. If I'm at -pi to start and I end at +pi, what's the distance between -pi and pi? It should always be whatever your period length is. You guys told me 2 pi, and is that the period length? Yes. All right, questions? Okay, so I'm making my graph a little different this time because it's split. It's not all on the right side. Okay, amp is 1 and -1. This is, I'm going to put -pi, move it a little further out just so it's not too squished. Try to keep it as symmetrical as possible. Pi. Okay, so this is where kids struggle with their key points. When you're finding your middle, you'll always add and cut in half. This is pretty easy to know the middle. What's the middle between -pi and pi? You guys are a step ahead of me. 0. You can just see that, but if you add -pi plus pi and cut in half, do you end up with 0? Yes? 0 plus pi cut in half is, and you do the same thing on this side. 0 plus -pi cut in half is -pi/2. It's not always going to be nice and symmetrical like this, so I want to make sure you guys are paying attention. Questions? Yes. You got where we start and end, right? Okay, you always will add and cut in half to find your middle, and then I call these quarter points. So we add the beginning and end. -pi plus pi is 0. 0 divided by 2 is still 0. That's your middle. Then you take your middle and your end, add them and cut in half. That's that quarter point. Your middle and your start, add them, cut them in half, and it's that quarter point. Okay? And it's cosine, so cosine is the cup shape, correct? So first key point is a maximum. Second key point is a 0. Third key point, which is right here, the 0, is a minimum. Fourth key point is a 0, and my last key point is a what? Maximum. Okay, similar to what you guys did last year? Yeah? Okay. I am definitely going to do another one. Number 2. Y equals 2. Sine, don't write down the x yet. Sine parentheses x minus pi over 3. Okay. Now I want to get through this, so let's make sure we're paying attention. Easy parts. Amplitude is what? Amplitude is not 1, it is what? 2. Period. 2 pi over, my coefficient might be inside or outside. Either way, it's 2 pi over what? 1. So it's just 2 pi. Vertical shift, is there a vertical shift? None. Horizontal shift, that one's easy to eyeball. Can anybody just look at it and tell me what it is? Pi over 3. Positive, am I going to the right or to the left? I'm going to put to the right because it's positive. And just really quick, it's easy to do in your head, but when we get to harder ones, how are we doing it? X minus pi over 3 equals 0. All right. Now, because there is a horizontal shift, do I have to adjust my start and my end? Yes. My start is always going to be the what? The horizontal shift, pi over 3. And the end, what two things do I add? Good. Your start with your period. I'm going to give you guys a few seconds to add that. Write it as an improper fraction. So you can say 2 pi plus pi over 3 is 2 pi over 2 and 1/3 pi. Common denominator, however you do it. Anybody have it? Give you guys a few seconds. Put that over 1, multiply top and bottom. I heard somebody say it. 7 pi over 3. If you didn't get that, go back later. Multiply top and bottom by 2. I'm sorry, by 3 is what I meant to say. All right, I'm going to quickly go through. Does anybody need me to explain that again? Okay, right here you do pi over 3 plus top and bottom by 3 is 6 pi over 3. Because the common denominator, I keep saying 2 and I apologize. Your common denominator is 3. So 1 times 3 is 3, 2 times 3 is 6. Got it? Okay, so my end is 7 pi over 3 and my start is pi over 3. All right, and my amp is 2. Questions before I move on? Okay, I'm going to put pi over 3 about here. And you want it somewhat even, so I just do this like tick marks. If this is 1 over 3, 2 over 3, 3 over 3, 4, 5, 6, this would be 7 pi over 3. Now obviously there's way too many markings in there for me to use, so I'm going to erase them, but that's just to kind of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, so it's somewhat drawn to scale. Okay. And I obviously have way too many marks, so I do them really light. And then now I'm going to start cutting things in half. Okay, now what did I say? As long as the denominators are the same, you can add the numerators and do what? Cut them in half. What's 7 plus 1? 8. 8 cut in half? 4. 4 pi over 3. Now if you don't like the decimals that we're about to get, if you don't like the decimals we're about to get, you can multiply. So what's 4 plus 1? 5. So I'm going to show you the multiplying way. 5 pi over 3 times 1/2 is what? 5 pi over 6. Now if you don't want to think of this all the time, I'm going to show you the other way. You just cut them in half and get a decimal. What's 4 plus 7?
11.
And what's 11 divided by 2 as a decimal? 5.5 pi over 3. Typically, you're not going to write both of these. You're going to go either this way or this way. If you don't like this way, what would you do? 11 pi over 6. Your choice. Okay, your choice. All right. Think of this as your new starting point. That's like another fake axis. That's not your real axis. That's your starting point. This is sine, correct? So sine is the one that's snake, so it starts at 0. It's positive, so my next key point is a maximum. My next key point is a 0. Minimum and, minimum and 0. Did it work? I'm going to erase that fake axis. Any questions? Do we have time to squeeze one more in there, at least talk about it? Questions? Today's book assignment is a book assignment is what I meant to say. Today's assignment is a book assignment. I know. I heard myself. All right. Today's assignment is a book, is what I meant to say. All right. There's a lot of stuff going on, so I'm going to get as much down as I can before the bell rings. What's my amp? 5. Period. There's not a double shift on this one. I thought there was. Sorry. 2 pi over 12. Can you guys flip that and do whatever you need to do? What do you get? 24. Is there a vertical shift? -4. What does that mean? Down 4. Is there a horizontal shift? None. Well, how can you tell there's no horizontal shift? No parentheses. All right. I'm going to do it like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And because there's no horizontal shift, I'm starting at 0 and ending at what? 24. What's 24 cut in half? 12. What's 12 cut in half? 6, 12. What's this going to be? What's going to be? 18. What do we do first? The shift. 1, 2, 3, -4. Put your fake axis in. What's the amplitude? 5. So I'm going to go up 5. What's my maximum going to be if I go up 5? What's my minimum going to be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's going to oscillate between what? It's going to oscillate between 1 and... I'm going to put the picture up because I want you to at least see it before that bell rings. Do you guys see why the max is 1 and why the minimum is -9? Yes? Because what was the amplitude? 5. So from -4 I went up 5, that puts me at 1, and I went down 5, that puts me at -9. And then I oscillate between the max and the min. And it's positive cosine, so it's the positive cup shape, not the upside down cup shape. Does that make sense? Pay attention this time?
Yeah.
Always cut in half. So my here's 24. And since there was no horizontal shift, see you guys tomorrow. You started here, you end at 24, and you just start cutting in half. What's 24 cut in half? What's 12 cut in half? And then you can add 12 and 24. I get that. And cut in half. Or you can look for the pattern. 6, you see my 6, 6, 12, 18.
By giving us 20 extra minutes.
Well, I guess I'm more inside out, a little more serious.
They're the first 7. Over 3. You do 2 plus 4. I'm sorry, is it 11? No. Oh. It was 7.
Thank you.
It's a 7. 7 pi over 3.
Oh, okay. I mean, that it is. Okay.
Okay, so then you do 7 plus 4, and you divide that by 2. 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 divided by 2 is 5.5, and you just leave it over 3.
So you don't really divide the 3.
No, if you don't like it, then you multiply the 3 by 2. So you would say 11 pi over 6. It's up to you and how you want to do it.
You have to do that for every single class.
Yes.
So they won't give it to you on the
They won't give what to you on the test. Oh, no. They'll give you maybe not even marks. You have to put it all on your own. Yeah.
Thank you.
a whole lot of dancing, which is not pretty. Okay, let's go, let's go.
It's cold out here.
I know, listen. Grab my sweater. Grab yours. Sorry. You're good. Where's your sweater? Mister is coming out here.
guys have to work today.
Okay, skill 1 10.
Yeah,
You're gonna tell me something.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Not like that.
Show him, Tori. Show him.
No, I don't think so.
I'm gonna go to the response. Let's out of here.
She's still recording. Oh, it's still recording.
I don't want to.
I said that.
I saw it, but I don't know.
Yes, I do. Because I said that first. So let your mark.
Torres.
Anyone see some of that sheriff special?
Which one?
240.
You guys. 40 minutes. That's great.
Did that do anything?
And what's worse is there's no audio. Like you can't hear me talking, so it's like a silent video. So
Oh, you can't. They can't.
do you remember when that